Bring in Democratic Congressman Brad Sherman of California, the second-ranking Democrat on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Good morning. It's good to see you.
Good to be with you, Chris.
Let me ask you first about what the president-elect tweeted and about his reaction to both of these attacks on the Russian ambassador in Ankara, where he blamed radical Islamic terrorists, same on the attack in Berlin. Is this a situation of concern that he's getting out ahead of what the investigation shows, or is this tough talk a warning?
Trump is going to be your shoot-from-the-hip president. We knew that, or those who voted for him knew that when they voted for him. My guess is that quite often he'll turn out to be right. He's saying what everybody in the world would tend to believe, and at the same time, maybe once or twice a year, he'll have to retract a tweet involving international affairs. From the standpoint of the State Department, the way we've always done business, that's unacceptable. But the world, I think, understands.
The argument he's going to make, as you well know, Congressman, is that the reason people elected him is because they find the way Washington works to be unacceptable, and so maybe they want him to give this tough talk. Do you think that there's danger in it?
I think that he'll be wrong some of the times because he'll act too quickly. On the other hand, there is an advantage to speaking frankly and immediately, and I think the world will understand that when you see a Trump tweet, you're not seeing weeks of State Department meetings coming up with a locked-in change of policy. You're hearing what the president-elect or then president thinks that very moment. And the fact is that the killer in Turkey obviously is a terrorist and seems to have been motivated by his own beliefs about Islam and what's happening in Syria, which of course is terrible. So my guess is that these two tweets will turn out to be correct, but from a State Department standpoint, they would act much more slowly.
Obviously, he's made it very clear that he thinks that President Obama, his administration, have not done enough to fight ISIS. A lot of his supporters cheer him at his rallies before and after the election when he starts talking about how he's going to defeat ISIS, even though he has not put forward a specific plan. Having said that, do you think it's an argument that resonates, especially when you see the series of attacks across Europe over the last year?
Well, I think Obama had major successes in dealing with terrorism. First, we didn't have thousands of casualties in an unnecessary war. Second, we got rid of Syria's stockpile of chemical weapons. That hell that exists in Syria today, imagine how much worse it would have been if Assad had somehow retained that huge stock of chemical weapons. And when you look at Trump's proposed policies, they seem relatively close to those of Obama, except more cooperation with Russia and a lot more tough talk. The fact is that Obama's talk is considerably mellower than George W. Bush's, but there have been a lot more drone strikes, and we got bin Laden. So on the ground, not talking, not posturing, but actually acting, Obama's been pretty tough.
One of the key questions that we don't know, and I guess in some ways you could argue we don't know it going into most new administrations, is who on the foreign policy team will indeed be the person who has the presidency or who he listens to most closely, and sometimes those are relationships that develop. But since you brought up the State Department and how it's the way that Trump has been responding to this is different than what they'd like or what decades of tradition would suggest, I want to ask you what you think about Rex Tillerson. A lot of people are expecting a big fight. Should there be?
Well, the fight is not so much about the man, but about what our policy is going to be about Russia. You're talking about a Republican Senate, and the Republican Party has been the anti-Russia party in this country since the 1930s, and continuously even after the Soviet Union fell. And when you have a man who has been against sanctions against Russia, and against sanctions policy in general, when it's sanctions that punished Iran to the point where we got at least some concessions and possibly could have gotten more, the Republican majority in the Senate is an anti-Russia, willing to impose sanctions majority, and Tillerson seems to be on the other side of that.
Congressman Brad Sherman, good to talk to you today. Thank you for taking the time.